My name is Stephen J. Abramson. I have the distinct privilege of interviewing the great William Shatner.
And properly on your knees.
This, this is part two of an interview. The first part was done on September 15th, 1999.
And we needed a little gap, a little breather.
Little breather. Today is, what is today? Today is January 22nd, 2009. We are in Mr. Shatner's office in Studio City, California, and this is for the Archive of American Television.
10 years later. A decade. Wow.
Camera's rolling. Speed.
Okay, to begin, in 1986 you were hosting Saturday Night Live, and you stirred up a bit of controversy because
it's 20 years ago, 23 years ago.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a bit of controversy, certainly a lot of humor, when you did the sketch about appearing at a Star Trek convention.
Mm-hmm.
Can you tell me about that experience? Whose idea that was? And
Wait a
then
minute, you want me to recount 23 years ago my hosting Saturday Night Live?
One
like
sketch.
It was like a huge event?
Well, it's become pretty huge.
It became innocuous in the totality of television. What happened in 1986? So I was asked to host Saturday Night Live, which is quite an honor and wonderful. The whole experience of Saturday Night Live is somewhat otherworldly in that they finish the show Saturday night. They rest on Sunday as prescribed by both the network and the Bible, which are interchangeable in their lives. And then on Monday, everybody meets and says, boy, was that a good show that we did on Saturday night, and you were great, you guys. And then they leave. And they've invited the host to be part of the self-congratulatory hour. And we'll meet Tuesday at 3 in the afternoon. Meanwhile, I've come from Los Angeles to New York to be part of this. I'm wondering why I didn't come Tuesday instead of Sunday or whatever it was I arrived. So on Tuesday we meet again, 3 o'clock in the afternoon. Boy, was that a good show on Saturday night, and did we congratulate ourselves on Monday. Anybody want to say how good the show is again? No? Okay, Tuesday. So this is William Shatner. Hi, and he'll be our host, and this is Joe and Jack and Jill, and okay, let's meet Wednesday at 11. I'm thinking, okay, why didn't I come Tuesday? So now Wednesday, and now there's some people, they come in with a napkin, and they've written some notes on the napkin on Wednesday, and I got this idea first. No, that's not going to work. Oh, okay. And what was that thing we did 2 years ago no, that's not going to work. All right, that's not going to work. Well, none of that works. Gee, well, let's come back on Thursday and come up with some ideas for Bill, and let's see what happens. Now it's Thursday, and I'm saying, we are going on the air on Saturday, right? And there's nothing written. So Thursday, everybody comes in around earlier. And now some people have some ideas for sketches. I got an old man here, and I got a young, and I got a pervert there, and I got a, oh, that might be funny. Oh, that's funny. That's not funny. That's good. Let's work on that. And I'll see you on Friday. And I'm thinking, it's Friday, and what comes after Friday? Saturday. That's tomorrow. And we haven't really done anything. And then on Friday, it starts to shape up. And suddenly a sketch, look, oh, that could be funny. Oh, that I'd like to do. No, I'll do that. I got that. But how do I remember the lines? Oh, there are cue cards. You don't have to remember anything. They write them out in cue cards. So they hold a cue card there. So now you're looking at the cue card under the camera, and you're like a partner in the scene. I'm not looking at you at all. I'm looking at the cue card. I'm reading the cue card. Well, that's weird. Wow. So you're torn between doing this and doing this. So part of the time you're doing this, and so the people who are practiced just talk away like this, and they talk as though you're talking to you, but they're really reading from a cue card. people who aren't go, well, I'm talking to you, and I'd like to, and there's more I have to say, and it gets screwy, and then you don't know where to look. Now comes Saturday. You start in the morning, and you put in an intensive day. So Saturday Night Live's on at 11 or something, 10 o'clock. So they start recording late in the evening. And they have a dress rehearsal around 6 or 7. And you think, oh, that was all right. And they sit around in this huge meeting at around 7 o'clock in the evening, and they say, cut this, cut that, add this, cut this, add this, cut. Okay, end of dress rehearsal. We're on the air. Good luck, everybody. Have a good show. And now you're on the air. And you don't quite remember what was cut, what isn't cut, what's going on. And it's very much... And then you hear a cough. The cough from the outer reaches of space. The cough reverberates in your head. It's not really there. And you do this show. That's almost ad lib, but it's not, because you're reading. But then you're not reading. It's really weird. It's a weird show that takes a lot of practice to get used to.
Well, one sketch in particular has become kind of television lore, and that's the Star Trek convention sketch where you admonish the Trekkies to get a life. Was that one of those last-minute sketches that came up?
Well, I'm sure, it's been 23 years, so the exact detail escapes me. But it probably sounded like a good idea, and then you sort of ad-lib it, but read it. There's a sort of an in-between thing that's happening. And the timing of it and the playing to the audience arrives, you don't know. It's all intuitive. It's all very intuitive.
There have been many parodies of Star Trek over the years. What's your feeling about those?
The parodies?
Yes.
Are we talking Star Trek now?
Just Star Trek parodies in
We've
general.
gone back to Star Trek?
We'll move past this.
Parodies of Star Trek.
Right.
That's all fun.
Okay. In 1989, you began hosting a show called Rescue 911. How did that come about?
Arnold Shapiro was the producer of a couple of specials that I did that I was the host of. I remember there was one on the Air Force, and we got along well, and I did a good job on those. And they were popular, and they're easy to do because, again, you're reading a teleprompter, but you're part and parcel of you're in the milieu. And he was selling this reality show. It was the beginning of the reality phase that hasn't ended on television, and so we did a special on the Rescue 911 was called, and it did really well, and the numbers were really good, which is the other important part in broadcasting is how popular was the show, and the show was very popular. So then CBS wanted to do it as a series, but they hadn't signed me to do it as a series. So I was able to negotiate a really good deal. So it was lucrative for me to do and easy for me to do on weekends. So while I did other things, I was able to do 911 from various dispatch centers around the area. We would go in there on a Sunday and record 5 or so episodes of my part of the episodes, the hosting part of it. And I became very much involved in the show and felt strongly about it. And it was a show that, because it preached, calling 911 preparation and EMT stuff, it saved hundreds of lives. The fact that people learned to recognize, in one case I remember, monoxide poisoning, what the signals were, what the symptoms were. Monoxide poisoning story that I remember was a couple had left their children to go to the hospital to treat the mother, the husband and wife, the mother and father of 2 kids, went to the hospital to treat a bad headache, something like that. And they're in the waiting room, and on comes 911, Rescue 911. And it's a show about monoxide poisoning. And the wife says, "Oh my God, that's mine and the children's symptoms." They jump in their car and they rush back to their house, fling open the doors and get the kids outside. It was indeed monoxide poisoning. That was God, I just got chills remembering that story. That kind of thing happened again and again, hundreds of times. I mean, why CBS ultimately canceled the show, I don't know, because they went on to do other shows like it. But this was very popular, and it went on for 6 seasons. Maybe that's why. And we had documented proof of hundreds of lives that were saved from letters. And there was a multiple about the letters. You know, you get one person writes out of 10, I think it was the multiple, something like that. So that if you figured these 300 or 400 people who were saved is a multiple of 10, there may have been 3,000 or 4,000 people whose lives were saved as a result of Rescue 911, which is, I've never heard a show be able to say that. So that was enormously satisfying about that show.
You were nominated for an Emmy for what was a guest shot that became a few appearances on a John Lithgow show called Third Rock from the Sun. And you played the big giant head that was talked about a lot. Finally, it appears in human form, and it's you.
Right, and with a 7 3/8 hat size. I don't know why they thought of me as the great giant head.
How fun was that to play? How did they, first of all, why did they get you involved, and how fun was that to play?
Well, I don't know why they got me involved, and I've regretted it to this day. No. John Lithgow turns out to be one of the great farceurs of our time. He's a wonderful dramatic actor, but and I've even went to see him on Broadway in musicals. So what a enormously talented person John is, and became a buddy of mine. But as a farceur, it's very difficult to do, and very few people can do it. It requires absolute commitment and a sense of reality in this unreal world that is extravagant. So you're an extravagant character in a real world that has its own reality. And Third Rock from the Sun was this bizarre show about aliens occupying human bodies, not quite knowing what to do. And along comes their boss, me. And I don't quite know what to do because I got drunk on the way from the other planet. Those people are totally nuts, or were. I think they've regained their sanity since. And I don't know why they wanted me to do it, but it seemed like a good idea at the time for them and for me to do it. So I used to do a lot of farce in my early years. I was Canada's light comedian on stage. And I don't mean Canada's, but maybe Ottawa, the city of Ottawa, where I was a member of a professional company. And we'd do a play a week for a whole season. I spent 3 seasons there. So every other play was a farce. So you'd be literally tripping the light fantastic. Pratt falls in and out of French comedies with a door slamming and dialogue that has to be delivered with reality, but with heightened energy. And so I loved doing that. Well, that was really my milieu until I came to the United States from Canada, and they put me in serious roles, and I started playing serious. But underneath all that was the great giant head. So I took to it like comfort food, and had a grand time playing with this great comic actor, John Lithgow.
There was one particular episode that was hilarious, and there was a moment where you were talking about that you saw something on the wing of a plane, and then John Lithgow played the character that you played in the Twilight Zone's Nightmare at 20,000 feet.
Right. I hasten to say that I didn't get to play it. To further explain what you just said, I did a Twilight Zone with a strange little creature on the wing, and that struck a chord in the American imagination because it has remained one of the more popular Twilight Zones. So when they decided to make a Twilight movie, they came to me and asked me if I'd like to reprise the role. I hasten to say that because John did such a wonderful job on it, and probably was much better at it than I. I was busy with something. and I've forgotten what it was I was busy with, but I think I was making a movie, and I couldn't do it. And so John got the chance to play that role. The people at
Third Rock.
Third Rock used the idea that both of us had played the same role, me playing it on television, him playing it in movies. They made a joke, a small joke, but an inside joke.
It was hilarious.
A broadcasting joke for the archives joke.
It was good. And Lithgow said, "That happened to me too," I think, or something like that. It was hilarious. The character of Denny Crane, introduced on The Practice, or the end of the run. How did you get involved in that, playing that role in The Practice?
Well, apparently, David Kelly wanted me for the role. And so on one fateful morning, we met for breakfast. 3 or 4 other people gathered around, and we had breakfast, and he described this role that he was writing that would go, I think, 6 shows in The Practice. I think I signed to do 6 shows. I didn't want to do another series. Doing a series is debilitating in every way for your health and your relationships, and really, that's everything in life, isn't it? Your relationships and your health. What else is important? But you're making money, so that weighs in the balance. In this case, though, I had David Kelly, the resident genius of television, I believe. I had him writing. I didn't know to the extent to which he would write, but it turned out he wrote every script. And so The Practice was his concept, but this thing that became known as Boston Legal was also his concept. I didn't know it at the time. I found out later that the man, David Kelly, had won 2 Emmys writing a comedy and writing The Practice, writing, what's the name of the
Ally McBeal?
That David Kelly wrote Ally McBeal and The Practice at the same time, wrote 44 scripts and won an Emmy for comedy and an Emmy for drama the same year. He wrote 44 scripts. Some writers toil at 1. Some really fast guys do 2 or 3 in a year. He did 44. I mean, it's unprecedented, I think, certainly in my knowledge. And so this genius started writing this Denny Crane character, and I played him 6 times. And I didn't want to do a series, but I did, thinking it was a subsidiary role and I would appear so often in it. And then something magical happened that I've only seen happen in a play, where the author is at the play, and that is the author sees what's happening, either on stage or in this case on a television screen, and he starts to write to create more because it's got audience appeal, it appeals to him, and that's what started happening with Denny Crane. David Kelly began to create more. I began to get the idea of how to play the guy, and so there was this relationship, this symbiotic relationship that set up between David Kelly and myself, and it's been maybe the most satisfying thing I've done.
Now, the first Emmy you won for Denny Crane was in The Practice.
Right.
How did that feel to win that Emmy as a guest star?
Exultant. I had been nominated other times, I think, but I'd never won an award like that. So it was the first time after a lifetime of making a living at it. And it was just extraordinary. I was delighted.
Now, as The Practice wound down, obviously this character was working. Boston Legal came, I believe, the very next year. Was it
Boston Legal continued exactly the season. Practice stopped, and then Boston Legal began.
And was it sort of a no-brainer that you just continue in a regular series now, as Denny Crane?
Well, it wasn't quite a no-brainer because I had been married 2-3 years beforehand, and the promise was that we would explore the world and each other and friends, and I had to renege on the promise to my wife that I would slow down. And in fact, what happened was I sped up.
When you went into the when you continued the role in Boston Legal, was there any negotiating about how to play it? I mean, did David Kelly just give you the freedom to kind of create within the parameters of what he wrote?
Yeah, nobody can tell you how to play that. You know, it's somewhere in between. Denny Crane character was somewhere in between the giant head and some of the dramas that I did. So somewhere in this marginal area lay the ability, the way to play it. But how much seriousness, how much comedic elements were there, and how to blend them, and how to play a scene where you're absolutely serious, but the audience is aware that there's an element that's not so serious, and the narrow line between reality and unreality, and it's nobody can tell you. It either is in intuition. Maybe there are some young actors who could do it, or it's a result of experience, that you played comedy, you played serious. This is somewhere in between. There's a tweak here, there's a tweak there. And I found that all the notes that I can play as an actor were there for me. And I was playing chords of harmonics that were only me. There are many other actors, I'm sure, who could play that role better or worse, but not the way I played it, because it was uniquely me. And an actor brings their own sensibilities to any role. So by being able to perform Hamlet so many times, people can go see Hamlet innumerable times, because the actor playing Hamlet brings his personality, his interpretation. What does a word mean? The word love means differently for you than it does to him. So the expression of the word love is just as different. And if you listen, you hear the inner character of the actor within the confines of the words that are being said. So I had to feel my way in the first while. And there was one moment that I, early on, maybe the first or second show, where James Spader, playing Alan Shore, grabbed me and said, "What are you, homosexual?" And I didn't know how the character would react to that. I didn't know whether to laugh, to be serious, I didn't know how to approach that. And in fact, went to the executive producer. David wasn't around, it wasn't available to me in that moment. Like, it didn't occur to me, how do I play that? I was within the scene, and suddenly the line is upon me, and how do I react to that? How does the character react to that? So I said, "Well, what do you think?" And he said, "Well, I don't know. Why don't you just do nothing?" Do nothing? Oh, do nothing. So I probably did nothing. Now, having had the benefit of 5 years of playing the character, I would have thought of something to do. Or maybe nothing was the right way. So it's blank. So that's funny in itself. What are you, homosexual? And you just, nothing appears. So that's funny, maybe. But in any case, that sort of thing happened all the time. Another example. Frequently, Kelly would have me say, you and I are playing a scene, and I would say, "Cue the music," or, "Go to black," or "coming up on commercial," as though I'm suddenly outside on the fourth wall saying this is television. But how do you keep the reality of that? So it was always a continuing problem. So it was like a madness. Cue the music. In the 5th year, Kelly wrote the explanation, which probably occurred to him some dark night, but never occurred to me. And I'm a writer. He wrote the explanation was, saying to this character now, Denny Crane says to Alan Shore, I think of my life as though I was on live television. I just think of it as being on television. So sometimes I say, cue the music, because I think everybody's looking at me. So that's, not verbatim. And I thought, of course, that's the reason for saying, smile, you're on TV. Or next week will be, I guess next week, frequently he had us say, well, we're on a better network next week, or something, something alluding to television. And I thought, of course, that's the explanation. He thinks of his life as being on TV, and that's the rationale for to be able to use those words. But I didn't know that for 4.5 years.
And there were some hilarious ways that he worked that in. At the end of this season, the last season, I think one example was talking about, proposing the idea that this could be a series or a show you did within your characters.
Exactly. But now, with that explanation in hand, I felt jaunty. I, the actor, felt jaunty about playing it with extravagance, because I think of my life as being on television. Wouldn't it be a great television show to follow me around? Cue the music, and you're in there.
And even changing time slots
Right.
was related to changing the
Exactly.
meeting times or something.
So there was so much going on there, because Kelly was sending a message to ABC through me, or usually it was me who was saying it, saying to ABC, you idiots, look what you're doing to lousing up our show. But I, the actor, had to bring reality to that. But now I had the key to the reality, and we were all discovering it. So my point, I guess, is the beauty of it was that we were all discovering it at the same time.
There have been tons of court shows, lawyer shows, law firm shows in television. How would you briefly describe Boston Legal in a way that it's different? What was it that made it different?
Well, Boston Legal was originally designed, it was sold, I believe, on the fact that it would be a comedic show about lawyers, comedy lawyers. And so in the beginning, we had a lot of comics there. Guys who were playing, ya, ba-da-da-da, and they were fired. They left the show. They were good people. They turned up on television very successfully. But we had innumerable people doing 2-3 shows, and suddenly they were gone. And I wondered why. They didn't get a chance. Nor was it explained to them that, oh, by the way, this comedy that was sold as a comedy, you're a comic character? You're not. You're funny, but you're a character that's operating in reality. You're going to argue a serious case momentarily. How comedic can you be? How idiotic, how big giant head can you be? You can't be, and yet you have to be. And that was the hole that actor after actor stepped into and disappeared from.
When you took the character of Denny Crane from The Practice to Boston Legal, was there anything you wanted to change about the character?
I didn't know enough to change. But, the character used to say his name all the time, Denny Crane. And so it occurred to me that he would say the name like feeling somebody out. I once likened it to being like a lizard with a tongue darting out. Smell the air. Denny Crane. I'm Denny Crane. Denny Crane? And every time he said it would be a query. It'd be a different reason, So it would be like saying hello. How many times do you say hello? But you have a different nuance every time you say hello, because it's a different person. Hello, 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 and you're into a variety. You're into the thought process of the actor. What's the inner life? Who are you really that I'm saying hello to, or saying my name Denny Crane to? And that's so. So then Kelly wrote a scene, a lengthy scene, 3, 4, 5 page scene. I've forgotten now, in which all I said was my name, but I said it innumerable times. So I searched for different ways to say the name. And that evolved. And so I didn't know enough to change anything. Change was in the air.
Any similarities between Denny Crane and William Shatner?
Change is in the air. Yeah, I mean, Denny Crane is Shatner, and Shatner's Denny Crane because I'm the actor who said the words. So it only comes out of my consciousness, not yours. You would have played it differently.
Also, when you were working on, portraying the character, did anyone, were there any touchstones for you or for other people that you'd met that you drew on?
There's a guy in Kentucky who's he's a phenomenal character, and became a friend of mine over the years. He's into horses and stuff, so I had met him because we're deeply into horses, and he's a wild guy, especially in his youth. He's calmed down now, and he's sort of an entrepreneur now. But in his youth, he was wild, drinking, drugs, women, millions of dollars, losing, gaining, winning. He'd make millions and millions, and then get into something else, another business, and lose millions and millions. And he'd be up, he'd be down. He's a well-known character, but he's vivid and laughs. He's got a big voice, and sort of somewhere in there is Denny Crane, some antecedents.
How would you describe Denny Crane's approach to lawyering? Was he
what?
To being a lawyer?
I thought you said loitering.
Well, I almost said that.
Yeah,
I didn't mean to.
Well, I consciously made a decision how I thought Denny Crane would be the great lawyer that he was supposed to be or have been, and that remnants of that great lawyer is still around. So when at various times when I was asked to address the jury, what were the elements that made him a great lawyer? And I thought, instead of being grand and verbose and grandiosity and declaiming like we see so many of the lawyers on the show doing, that I would take the opposite approach. Absolutely sincere, simple, no gestures of any kind, no movement, very little, but eye contact, and trying to convince every member of the jury that what I'm telling you is the truth. You must listen to me, because what I am saying to you is the truth. And that was my approach to him as a lawyer.
How important?
When he could remember what the truth was.
As the mad cow progressed, I guess. How important was Denny's legacy to himself?
Well, that's an interesting question if it were a real person, but it's not a real person. He is the concoction of mostly David Kelly. So what I gather from all the words I had to learn that became part of what he expressed, Denny Crane expressed, was that his legacy really didn't matter. What he wanted to do was live life to its fullest while he still could. And that if it meant doing something illegal or unpalatable, he would do it because it was part of the enjoyment of life.
Well, did he have a basic ethics going on there, even though he might go outside what would be the norm to achieve an end?
I think that a character believed that he had been a great lawyer and was filled with the torment that he no longer was.
Interesting. Okay. What about the ego? Was that, you think that, again, we're describing obviously, like you say, a concoction of David Kelly, but since you're the actor that portrayed this and actually breathed life into this character, how did you see his ego? Did he use it as a tool, or was it just that he had this large ego?
I think like everybody, he vacillated between the arrogance of his talents and the humiliation of his failing memory and ability to think things through and losing it And he said on some occasions, I think I'm losing it. Because I've seen actors, I had to fire an actor at a job once who couldn't remember the words. And it was a stage play, and it was an older man, and he couldn't remember the words, and we were going to open in 2 or 3 days, and he couldn't remember the words. And I couldn't jeopardize the production for this man that I felt great sympathy for, and I had to do something very difficult. I had to fire an older man, and God knows what that did to his ego and his ability to get another job just out of his own self-confidence. And there were so many cases in which Denny Crane sat around, did nothing. And I don't know why David Kelly did that, to put me in a scene where I just sat there, where the character just sat there, without adding anything to the scene, but just to be there. So what I did was the character pretended to be asleep. And that was both the actor's not defiance, but answer to be sitting around doing nothing. I mean, it was overwhelming. So I pretended that the character pretended to be asleep, and that helped not put me in all the scenes that he was putting me in.
And that became a part of the storyline.
That became part of the storyline, exactly.
Was it gratifying to you to see in earlier seasons where Denny Crane was often the character, almost like comic relief? Was it gratifying to see as it progressed, especially through the last couple of seasons, the poignancy involved with this sort of, as he called it, mad cow disease?
Yes, of course it was. And I strove, again, I don't know how much my sensibilities had to do with pushing it in that direction. It'd be interesting to have David Kelly express himself on that. But there were many instances in which I could have played it comically and chose to play it poignantly, because I was after the depth of this comic relief character. There was one moment that exemplifies it, and it was, I had my arm around Shirley, around Candice Bergen, and I was singing "Row, Row, Row Your Boat." And it was just, it's written, and he's saying, "Row, row, 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 row your boat gently down." And I thought, he just wouldn't sing "Row, row, row your boat." There had to be a meaning behind "Row, row, row your boat." And so I sang, it started off with "Row, row," and then it became, I remember when we sang this somewhere, I invented a whole backstory about this character and me, and then people said by the end of at the end of the scene, it had touched them, but all it was a song. But there was something in the character that made the song mean something else. And that's what I think I was able to push as much as an actor can, point in that direction.
Speaking of women, Denny Crane's relationship with women, how did you see the difference between the fact that he just was, on one hand, almost like a womanizer, but then there were women he connected to, a couple of characters, Bella and then Bethany, of course?
I took as my signal, an actor invents a core, and then from that core, like a writer invents the core of a story, and then there's spines from that, and you branch. Well, that's what an actor does in inventing a character. My core of that character was extreme loneliness. That he would do anything as his age progressed to have company, basically with Alan Shore, but then anybody he could. So there was the duality of presenting a sophisticated face, but underneath was this need, this yearning for love. and that's the way I approached any of the women that were invented for me for the character to take on. Underlying that was a yearning for company, for love.
Denny Crane's politics, was it fun to play this kind of ultra-conservative, hand on the trigger character?
Yeah, a guy who packs 5 guns and things like that. Yeah, that's fun. It's so what's the word? Political. It's so anti-political. It's so against the grain.
Politically incorrect, I guess.
It's so politically incorrect to do all that. I hear that on YouTube or something like one of those things. They've stolen the scene in which I shoot the kneecaps off a guy who was going to do something on the car, or carjacker or rapist or something, and I shoot the guy in a parking lot. Well, they're playing that as though Shatner was doing it. Apparently, it's out there being played as something real.
How do you feel about that confusion with you personally and
I don't take it seriously.
Okay. And this thing about the guns, it was hilarious because you'd be doing something and all these guns would fall off of your body or from your thing. What was the thing with guns in Denny Crane?
Well, again, I invented the idea that he had been in the military. In the beginning, Kelly had me say soldier, and used a lot of words that indicated a military background, and that sort of faded away, but I never forgot it. I thought that there's a military background there, and that the use of guns is, if nothing else works, shoot them.
Now, there's a very big scene near the end of the series where the Asian investors came in to basically take over the company, and you got the paintball gun,
Right.
and you're just going nuts all over them.
Right.
Was that really paintball, or what was that just an effect? Or it looked so real.
All right. Again, David Kelly, we used to swear that he had microphones in the makeup trailer or even in the dressing rooms. Because various things that I have done myself, Shatner has done, he put them in, David Kelly put them in as characteristics for Denny Crane, which includes horses and guns. I've played around with guns in the past. And I had put on, I think it still is, it might be still, the largest paintball game for charity out in the Chicago area. We had thousands of people on sides, and even had it filmed, and it was out for sale as a DVD, the paintball. It was a paintball extravaganza, and then continued it for a while. I've sort of lost it in the last couple of years. So suddenly, instead of shooting guns, Denny Crane has got paintball guns that look like real guns. And another page that David Kelly has ripped out of the book of Shatner, I think. It ain't, if you just look up what I've done, there's this paintball thing that I've done. So that may be part of what the paintball thing was. But then the use of paintball, you got to be as careful about using paintball as you do using blanks, because things spew out. So yes, we did use a little bit of paintball and when it was safe to do so, but mostly it was special effects.
When you first got the scripts that started to introduce the idea that Denny Crane had Alzheimer's, did that seem like a natural progression for you, or was that a surprise when you first started seeing this theme?
Well, I don't remember whether it was a surprise or not, but I loved the idea that I had seen my wife's father grow slowly ill with Alzheimer's, and in fact, in one poignant moment with my wife Elizabeth's father, I said to him, He said, I said, are you afraid? He said, I'm so afraid. And I said, I'm going to buy you a tape recorder that's voice activated. You won't have to remember to press buttons or anything like that. All you have to do is speak into it. Why don't you write? Why don't you just speak into it day after day about what it's like to look into the darkness, into that abyss? I don't remember quite how I put it. I hope I didn't put it that way, but the frightening, not possibility, but inevitability of losing your mind. And he said, that's a great idea. It'll give me something to do. I'll do that. I'm going to do that. And so I bought him a nice thing, and he and my wife's mother, his wife, said, yeah, we'll do that. We'll write a book about what it's like to be looking into and going into the madness. And about a week later, I got a tape back, put on the tape, and he said, and I'm looking into but golf is a really, and there was no continuity. And it was too much. It was too late, maybe. But I remembered looking at him and thinking, what could be more frightening than to be conscious of the insanity of your brain rotting? What could be worse than to know you were going to die a dribbling death like that? What could be worse? And that's the approach I took, the fear, the absolute terror that I took for Denny Crane.
Your character was asked to do a lot of outrageous things. Was there ever a point where you said, I'm just not going to do this, this is just too crazy, or were you pretty much a willing participant?
I suppose there's something that I wouldn't do. You know, there are things I suppose that some actors are getting into a hot bath naked and displaying your decaying body is something more than I can allow myself to do. But an actor's job is to sort of make things work that the writer invents, and that a writer like David Kelly is owed that respect, that anything he writes has the chance of working, a really good chance. And so anything that he wrote, I tried to make work.
Let's talk about the relationship between Denny Crane and Alan Shore, the characters. What was that relationship, and did it change significantly over the course of the series?
It did. The lauded balcony scenes came about by happenstance. Apparently, I didn't know this, but I heard about it later, that the first balcony scene was to be between Alan Shore and somebody else. But it didn't work out logistically for one reason or another, so they made it between us. And that resonated with the audience, and so it became a standard thing. What was the question?
Well, it was the relationship between the characters.
So that balcony scene became the mainstay of the relationship between the characters. And what started to happen was a genuine feeling of affection that turned to love between two men. And that love that Kelly began to explore of two heterosexual men became sort of one of the elements of the show. How you could have two guys really love each other and be sexually attracted to women, but have this guy thing. Shatner, have never had that. I don't know what that's like. My thing is always, my best friends have always been the woman I have been in love with, and my whole life would be devoted to that relationship, to the exclusion of, I mean, I don't play golf and I don't know what golfing, but why would you want to go play golf when you have your wife to play with? You know, it would be my answer, be my thought, my pattern. But as I began to understand what Kelly was going after, and then beginning to talk about it with James, and I don't remember now whether James had more guys, more friends than I did. I don't have, Shatner doesn't have friends per se. There's a woman in his life, and that's basically it. Whereas Denny Crane had this guy to whom he not only responded to, but began to need to take care of him, because a woman wasn't going to do that. So now Kelly began to write this need. Then I think Kelly discovered that Alan Shore needed the responsibility of Denny Crane. The show was so magical in that this creative man, David Kelly, who we never saw. A year would go by and I would not see him, or I might see him at an award show. Hi, David. It's going. It's great fun, and that'd be it. And I wouldn't see him for another year. It was the darndest thing. And he didn't live in Los Angeles. He lived hundreds of miles away. But he was on top of the show, able to guide the show, and on the actors. So we had no social intercourse with him, only with people who respond, only with the executive producers or the producers who talked to David Kelly. So I would send messages to Kelly through the producers. It was strange, but it worked. And so Kelly began to see what the actors were doing and responded to that as well. The relationship deepened as the years went by, as Kelly, discovered the resonance of this. And I don't know Kelly's friendship factor. I suspect because he's so shy and retiring that maybe he also would love something like that, yearn for something like that.
You and James Spader had tremendous chemistry on the show. Had you met him before that?
No. In fact, I made the terrible error of saying, "Oh, Jim," and he said, "It's James." Early on. Oh, right, okay. Well, it's Bill.
But I'm going to ask you just a quick assessment of some of the principal actors who played the characters with you, starting with James Spader.
James Spader is an enormously talented actor, one of the best in the country, and a sophisticated guy who's knowledgeable about many things, self-taught in a great many things, and I find him extraordinarily admirable.
Okay, Candice Bergen, who played Shirley Schmidt.
Candice Bergen has style and grace and beauty, and she is very within herself for the longest time. That as the time went by, she started to come out towards me. I know she's very personable to other people, but she slowly became closer. We became closer and closer, and I think of her as a great buddy now. She's just a dearest human being.
Why didn't Denny Crane and Shirley Schmidt end up together at the end?
I don't know. I think the ending, which was a product of being canceled early, we knew we were going into the last 13, and so Kelly knew that he had a chance to wrap it up. As series goes on, and you're in whatever year you're in, and you leave in March, having shot your allotted number of shows for the network, and you leave hoping you'll come back in June, July to start the next season. Somewhere in March or April, the network decides to cancel you, show's over, and all those untied strands of relationship and plot points and things like that are never resolved. It never happened. And goodbye, and the audience is disappointed. Well, did he get off the island or didn't he? In these 13, he was able to wrap it up. So he chose to make it happen that way, that they would get married because it was a marriage of convenience. And I think it was inspired as so much of his stuff. As you can tell, I have nothing but great things, extravagant praise for David E. Kelley.
One more Shirley Schmidt question. Actually, it's about the doll. What was your reaction when you actually first physically saw the Shirley Schmidt full-size doll?
Well, it was awesomely like her. The face, the body was really heavy, almost as heavy as she. And the fact that he had me making love to the doll from time to time was, it's crazy. It's crazed. It was just absolutely crazed.
Renee Auberjonois.
I love Renee. Renee is this soul who's soft and gentle, quizzical, artistic. He's a beautiful artist, painter, and he's got great soul. And when we lost him for a while, and he came back, I was so delighted. I just love him.
And lastly, John Larroquette.
John Larroquette is a man totally within himself. He talks about it quite openly, that he lives in this dream world that he goes into. You see him lapse into a spell, and he just looks off, and he's thinking about something, and you say, John, and he goes, yeah, like you've taken him away from something pleasant. But then, gradually, got a hold of him and warmed him up and invited him to Monday Night Football. And then he started to come to Monday Night Football, and there's 20, 30, 40 people come to Monday Night Football at my house when we can do it. And he'd be there, and he'd be charming and funny and verbose. It was the darndest thing. So he has these two aspects to his personality, and one is totally removed and not there and out of the way. He doesn't bother you or you're bothered by him. And on the other, he's this delightful man.
Okay. We're going to change the tape real quick. We have a little bit more to go.
Jesus, man, it's been an hour. I can't talk anymore.